Right.
Andrew, how are you?
How you doing? You okay?
Very good, thanks.
I'm very excited about a new opening screen. So I think what's missing is a little bit of music now. We need a jingle. We need to work on a jingle.
Yeah, it's quite cool. I mean, the only thing that I'm slightly concerned about, if I'm honest with you, is the length of my sideburns on there.
Look, this was taken a couple of days ago, pre-haircut. So
yeah, okay. So if anything sort of contributes to people understanding how bad my hair was 2 days ago, then that's probably it, right?
That's it, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
This was a pure like for likeness. That was so sorry about that. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
cool.
it's good to talk about your hair as opposed to my hair. So
this is true. It's true, even though you've got lots of it. But I think, look, Andrew, the first thing I want to kind of say is I've been waiting here now for the best part of 12 hours, and we're actually 12 hours late to this webinar.
Yeah, I do apologise. I did see the email, yeah, it's taking me this long to get ready, to be honest with you, and just blow dry my beard. So that's why I'm running a bit late. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so apologies to those of you who received an email from us at 2 a.m. or 12 hours ago from now. I think that's just, I don't know, I guess the best way of explaining this is what happens when, you know, the CEO of a company gets to play with flashy tools. And instead of relying on the actual experts within our organization to kind of schedule emails, I decided to do it myself, and this is the pure sort of consequence of this. So yeah, gave myself a hard kind of slap on the wrist this morning when I kind of realized. But guys, apologies for maybe ruining your sleep. That said, I was blown away by how many people decided to register at about 2:15 this morning. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, so I think, yeah, I mean, so perhaps not all bad, but but there we go. Lesson learned.
That's it. It's just encouraged us to do a show at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I mean, that's what it's really done.
yeah, why not? But cool, guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Again, really excited about this show. Last week's show, you know, I want to kind of just touch back on it purely because for the last 2 days, I've been receiving WhatsApp messages from Paul Bridger, who's been very happily telling me that my best performing LinkedIn post ever is performing well because it's got a picture of him on it. So a little bit of payback for some of the abuse we gave Paul last week. But yeah, last week's show was great. This week I think we've got something really exciting to talk about in terms of you know, a very kind of hot topic over the last couple of months, which is e-commerce. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about not just sort of e-commerce over the last couple of months, but really, you know, what impact, you know, these last 2 months have had in terms of how businesses kind of position themselves and strategically look at digital sales or digital commerce as such, and you know, how they maybe strategize around this and start to kind of you know, modify perhaps their own kind of business processes. But yeah, I mean, any kind of opening comments on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about e-commerce is it's kind of probably something that we've all interacted with over the last couple of months, for sure. If you hadn't ever touched it before, I think you either have jumped on it yourself or know someone that has jumped on it. So I think that's fairly well known and fairly well understood, I think. And obviously we're going to dive into that. But I think what will kind of be interesting is as we progress through the show, we start to talk more of the B2B element. So how does that look? How does how does the business world take on this new excitement associated to e-commerce? And obviously, I mean, we'll touch upon some stuff here regionally, but obviously we'll kind of look at global as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, I think we can just dive straight in. But essentially, you know, what we've seen from a data perspective, but not just data. I think sometimes we look at statistics and we're maybe surprised by these findings. I think when we look at sort of e-commerce data that's flying around over the last 2 or 3 months, there's no kind of real surprise there, right? Because I think, like I said, for the first time in perhaps history, you know, the population of the entire world have had to kind of behave differently.
Yeah, they're locked in their house.
Right, and they're locked in their house. And obviously, you know, we still need to kind of do things right from a kind of purchasing perspective, whether it's groceries or whatever that looks like. But obviously I think that's important. So I think there's a couple of slides, but guys, just a quick reminder before we kind of start really kind of diving into the show and the discussion. We kind of really like this as an interactive forum. We like to hear your opinions. If you guys have got questions, please feel free to ask them. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. Normally we get comments about Andrew's beard. I mean, feel free to send those in because I think that's important.
Very.
Yeah. So yeah. Look, I guess that's it. But if we kind of if we look at the screen now, let me just share.
I think the first way pulling up the slide here, I think this is one of those ones that is probably by no means a shock. But I think it might be just interesting in the sheer numbers.
Yeah, and I think like with all kind of data, we've got to look at context as well. But I mean, there's no kind of real surprise by this graph. I mean, this, I think this could have been a little bit better if we'd have seen data perhaps from the previous sort of 12 months, just to see whether that growth curve was consistent. I kind of imagine it wasn't. But again, we're looking at kind of March data, and March was still pretty early on in the kind of coronavirus world, right? In terms of, I think in Asia, they kind of started to feel the full impact. But I guess in certain parts of the world, coronavirus was still pretty new, right?
Yeah. I mean, this kind of has just come out 3 days ago. This stat. So obviously, I think in another month's time, we'll have a bit of a better understanding of how that hockey stick continues to arc up. I think obviously you can see, a dramatic shift there on people going to e-commerce sites, and I think that's borne out the fact also as well. I mean, just having conversations with your peers, your friends, your colleagues, your family, and asking them, and also, I mean, look at a regional level as well. There's been a strong encouragement to use those platforms. So, even to the point where here in the UAE, the local government has actually, published a list. These are some of the e-commerce platforms that you can start to see from there. So that's interesting. Actually, somebody in just from France has said the impacts started around the 10th of March. So obviously they can see there where it started to hit in France. I think that was similar in Europe as well, Rabia. So I think, that's it. Actually, funnily enough, Dan says here that he's been using less e-commerce because it's exciting going to Waitrose now. It's a social event. That's quite comical. But yeah, so I think the thing is that you're starting to see, that growth, and then obviously, a stronger growth, I think, obviously as May and June will kick in as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is if we're looking at a 12.81 to 14.34, perhaps doesn't feel as kind of dramatic as what it is. But I think when you're talking about billions of people,
2 billion
visits, I think it's significant.
1 billion.
Yeah. So I think just one more kind of slide on this, guys. We kind of aren't fans of slide-heavy webinars, but I think obviously what was important is just to see the impact on what people are actually buying. So this slide, I think this was some data that was sort of flying around. I think I saw it on LinkedIn a few weeks back. But really, where has that kind of demand been? I guess more important than what people are buying is perhaps what they're not buying.
I mean,
So
I mean, some of these are fairly, I guess, understandable. Things like luggage, swimwear, gym bags, and obviously store fixtures and displays. I mean, I think this is fairly self-explanatory. I think the interesting thing is that with being at home for most of us, I think you've seen some other interesting purchases. So I actually attended my nephew's Zoom birthday party where they had a child's entertainer on there. But prior to that, obviously, everyone was kind of bought a virtual gift bag where it kind of got delivered. So as ordinarily a very physical event, you'd walk away from a birthday party with a piece of cake and some sweets. And I guess that's not that's changed a lot. Now I've heard of stories here locally where people get iPads in their birthday bags, but yeah, I think it's obviously some of those, and we can talk about some of the polls that we've got to see how people are buying as well. But most of those are fairly self-explanatory, like we said.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll do that, because I think it's always good to look at kind of data, and especially when it's kind of relevant to our audience.
Yeah.
So we've got a poll. Let me kind of launch that.
Yeah, it's an early time for a poll, actually. So for those of you that are new, we can see some familiar faces. So thank you again for watching the show. For those of you that are new, this is kind of discussion. We talk around kind of what we find out there and in real world scenario. But we like to also hear back from you guys, where we kind of throw out these polls, and those polls really help us kind of determine the path of the show as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a two-part poll, guys. So the first question is, what did you kind of typically buy online prior to COVID-19? And the second part of it is, kind of what are you buying now, right? So just to see if there's been any kind of differences in behavior between what we were doing sort of pre-COVID, when the world was kind of a slightly happier place, I'd guess. But yeah, it'd be good to kind of understand that. So if you can kind of give feedback on both of those questions, and we'll share those results very shortly as well. So yeah, we've started to see these come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of those, I mean, what were you buying kind of pre-COVID?
I guess a lot of it was based on things like electrical goods, a little bit of furniture, but not too much else. Vegetables every now and then. Yeah. But I think obviously since this has happened, pretty much all of those elements, including office supplies. Obviously, I needed things for my home office, and it's easier to order a big box of paper than go and pick it up. I think that's kind of part of it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the nice thing about those deliveries is they get on there. I mean, same for me really. I was buying kind of gadgets, electrical goods. That's what I was tending to. Unable to scroll down. Someone said, "Can you scroll?" So can you scroll it down there? We've got some people answering. Just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to answer.
Okay. We'll give it another 5 or 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let me show. Yeah, let's show the results, because I think that's interesting data here. So again, pretty wide mix. If we're looking at that first question, so kind of prior to COVID, toiletries and groceries. Electrical goods being the main one, and obviously the big shift, I guess, is more people now kind of purchasing sort of groceries and toiletries online. That's gone from say 41% down up to 82%. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So look, I'm in this category. So now I've bought groceries and toiletries. I've bought fresh produce. I've bought furniture. I've bought toys and games, electrical goods, and office supplies. I mean, I pretty much, and I guess possibly a third question would be, why would you go back to, for example, buying some of these other products in a physical store?
Okay, well, funny you should say that, Andrew.
So it's almost like I knew what the next question was going to be. I don't know how I thought of that.
It's probably the most beautifully choreographed thing we've ever done on this show, I think.
Yeah. I wouldn't use the word choreograph with this show, to be honest with you, but yeah, go for it.
Great. So yeah, guys, this is multiple choice. So just select whichever ones apply. And there's a reason why we're asking some of these questions. So it'd be good to get your feedback. Again, we'll leave that open for another sort of 10 seconds or so. What about for you, Andrew?
As far as why I'm buying online?
Yeah, what would you pick here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is convenience. So as much as we've moved to a work from home environment, it's allowed you to kind of continue to work whilst not allocating time to kind of heading out the door, and the kind of pain that causes now. I guess during the lockdown time-wise, that was probably made worse because you could only go out during certain times of the day. But obviously, I think the fact that you can I mean, in all intents and purposes, while we're having this show, I could be ordering things, you know, on my mobile if I wanted to. You know, and they make it super easy as well. Most of these online stores.
Yeah, and I think look, convenience is obviously the kind of obvious one. Yeah, speed of delivery, wider product range. I know in some places, you know, different retailers have access to different products. So I think the digital world kind of obviously gives you access to a wider range of products there. Price is important, I think, especially moving forward. So if we feel as if we can save money, you know, if we are kind of heading towards even you know, more difficult times ahead, then you know, price becomes even more so important.
It's interesting actually. Thomas has just thanks for joining us, Thomas. He's a regular viewer of ours. So he just said that we missed out the option that there's no option to none of the above as far as people that are not buying online. I guess that was just us being very foolish, thinking that everyone is buying online. So perhaps we can send out a poll afterwards and ask, you know, why would you not buy online? I guess. Yeah, I think we kind of we used a bit of bro science as far as, you know, who's speaking to people, but then also linking into the stats that are out there, and obviously there's a shift there. I mean, I'd say, you know, Amit, why did you kind of start looking at these other areas? What was kind of, you know, why the shift? I mean, we could all still go out and buy. For you individually, what was the shift?
No, I think honestly, it was just more convenience. It was also safer. I mean, I think those are the real kind of reasons. That's probably something else we should have put on the list. But you know, I think you know, the reality is that, you know, we're all forming habits right now. You know, so I mean, from my perspective, sure, there's certainly products now which I will never go out to a retail store and buy. You know, I've done it online. I've seen how easy it is. The quality's been great. You know, and I think those kind of things matter. But Andrew, I think let's kind of, you know, let's kind of turn our attention a little bit to maybe some of the conversations you've been having, you know, from a kind of sales perspective, I guess. So in our kind of Nexa world, you know, what have you seen? Has there been kind of an appetite for more sort of e-commerce activities from, you know, maybe traditional types of retailers? You know, what has been kind of some of your recommendations for that?
Yeah, I think it's so what you're seeing across the board really is two things. The first thing that you're seeing is there's a lot of people that have never had, first of all, digital presence. So you're talking to organizations that felt they never needed a digital presence. And that may be front facing as far as retail, because it was very store driven, or location business activity. Or it may be obviously in a B2B space that just had, you know, contracts in place and they never felt the need to communicate with anyone in that manner. So first and foremost, there's a dramatic increase in interest as far as, you know, getting digital, our website, right? On top of that is obviously the individuals that do want to fire up some sort of e-commerce. And I think they shake down in a couple of different categories. So you've got some individuals that have had to kind of pivot their business, you know, away from what they were doing previously and you know, shift it completely online. I think we'll talk about someone who's done that in a minute. And then there's other individuals that see this as opportunity. So we're getting people saying, hey, listen, I want to start, you know, a drop shipping company. How do I do that? My wife is making, you know, some interesting kind of masks, for example, COVID masks. So I want to fire up a shop. How can I do that? And then obviously you've got some traditional retailers like furniture stores that have said, all of my business was shop driven. I need to get something online. I need the ability for people to buy. You know, what can I do? You know, and that's where the discussion kind of moves into. Usually the discussion moves into, you know, should you be looking at building that out yourself? So in a Magento or Shopify or, you know, or one of the other kind of platforms. But some people are just looking at marketplace. Some people are looking at AliExpress. You know, some more of these kind of aggregators, right? Where you can effectively set up a virtual shop, you know, and not necessarily have a physical presence. in that space.
Yeah, so let's talk about that then. So what are the benefits of each? What's the benefits of, let's talk about maybe the marketplace first.
Sure.
So as if I'm a prospective client, what would be the advantages of me going to an Amazon or regionally here in the Middle East, we've got a site called Noon. Why would I choose to maybe list my products on these kinds of portals as opposed to building my own?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's not just about the kind of physical, or digital store that people can come in. It's everything else associated to that. So before I just kind of jump into that, what most people don't consider is they don't consider the other things associated to having an online store. They don't consider delivery. They don't consider payments. They don't consider logistics. They don't of returns. They don't look at customer care. So I think the thing is, these are the other elements as well that we do have a conversation with. So very much, I want to launch a shop. Great. Do you have a delivery partner? Do you have a payment partner? Do you have other things in place in order to help facilitate someone buy your goods? So one of the reasons that obviously people do look at marketplace is it's pretty low barrier to entry, right? So without having to invest in a store, without having to invest in a website or an application, I can put my goods up in that space, and I've kind of got a ready to buy audience. If I'm selling X good, I might be selling, let's say, phone cases. I'm selling phone cases. There's people looking for phone cases on Amazon daily. There's people looking on phone cases for Noon, for example. So at that point, it's just about making sure that some of these other things are, there, like the kind of customer care, the product that I'm presenting actually is the product that people receive. And then obviously, usually that fulfillment is either by the customer themselves, or they can choose Noon to fulfill it or Amazon to fulfill it based on cost, right? So I think it's the barrier to entry that kind of pushes a lot of people in there first. Even I was talking to a perfumery. They've been here over 35 years, and they supply countless stores, but they kind of dip their toe in the water as far as setting up in marketplace. And now they're kind of ready, and the conversation was around, we feel like we're ready to jump and get our own store, but what would that give us? What benefits? Why would I want to do it? Why would I not want to stay with my Amazon environment? Yeah.
Well, I think the challenge, I think you're right. I mean, barrier to entry is important. Speed to market is also equally important. So I think these are obviously kind of very, very kind of important factors. I guess the challenge is what do you lose by not having your own store? So if we're looking at marketplaces, I think you touched on some great points, right? So things like they've already got their own audiences. So perhaps your marketing costs are considerably less
reduced,
right? You don't have to drive people to your own website. You perhaps don't need to worry about the kind of search engine optimization side of it, social media campaign, whatever it is, right? So fine, we use their kind of target audience. I think you mentioned obviously as well the distribution side of it. So from a logistics perspective, that works. From a payment gateway perspective, I know there's challenges in some places for that, so that works. But what are you losing? I mean, I think I kind of almost feel as if by doing that, if you don't care about your product in terms of, and not obviously not care about the product, but if your sole objective, I guess, is to sell products rather than build a brand, then perhaps these marketplaces are the right kind of place for you. If you just need to shift product, right? But I kind of feel as if when you're listing your products on these kinds of sites, you lose a lot more. So I mean, I'll just throw a question out to you, Andrew, right? You use Amazon, you use Noon. The last products you bought, who did you who was the vendor, who was the supplier?
Right. It's a good question, actually. So let me think about last product I bought. I bought a PlayStation game for my son. Well, of course. Apparently it was for my son. Great thing about having a son, there's a lot of things that turn out, this is definitely for him. Actually, I could not tell you. So my search criteria was based on price. I looked at, there was a whole choice. It was Overwatch. So I was looking at Overwatch, whole choice, price. And then I looked at rating and review, and that was it. I literally, I mean, I couldn't, I'd have no clue who I actually bought it from, genuinely.
And this is precisely the kind of problem I kind of think exists. And honestly, you know, when I kind of look at this, because it's the same thing. I was thinking back, you know, what did I buy? Who did I buy it from? And I've got no idea, right? You know, essentially I'm buying from Amazon, and I don't really care who that supplier is, right? It's not Amazon. They're obviously, you know,
just hoping that you trust them, and there's obviously they can deliver the product.
But I've got a real challenge here, and I think the challenge is focused on other industries, right? We've been here before. This smells really familiar, you know. So if we look at the hotel industry, right, for example, that I think was an industry that really woke up too late at the prospect of a marketplace, you know, being in that industry, right? So, you know, you had things like travel agents and kind of traditional kind of providers of, say, hotel rooms and flights and things like that. But when online travel agencies came into play, I think a lot of hotels and hotel groups looked at this and said, this is brilliant, right? We don't have to worry about marketing. We don't have to worry about, you know, selling rooms now. We've got these guys who, you know, they're crazy. You know, they're out there spending millions of dollars on advertising to sell our room, and all we've got to do is give them a small percentage. This is great. Until such point where they realized that, you know, 20 or 30% of top line revenue was actually being taken by these guys for facilitating a booking, right? And I think that became a bigger issue when those OTAs, or the online travel agencies, suddenly decided that actually we don't need to pass the data onto the hotels, other than somebody's made a booking. Why? Because we own that data. And I wonder how much of that exists, you know, with companies like Amazon right now, where, you know, with a company at the moment who's a retailer, you know, listing their products on Amazon, you know, these aren't the customers of that retailer. These are the customers of Amazon.
No, and interestingly, I think if we look at, like we said, the convenience is a driving factor for buying online. Now you've genuinely got me thinking now. So buying that game, great experience, delivered on time, actually ahead of time. I'm happy the price was right. To actually buy from that supplier again, actually I've got to go in and then look at previous orders, and then go into their listings and then try and find other games in their listings. So it's not convenient. It's actually a bit of a headache.
But it's done on purpose, right? There's no accident.
Exactly.
As we know, right? We know how these big firms work, and I think this is the problem. So now, if you did want to say, hey, you know what, the whole experience was great, you've got to go back to Amazon and make that purchase, right? That's the point.
Exactly.
You know, you're not
right.
You're not going to go back to that retailer because actually it's too much hassle, or it's maybe impossible. And I think I'm
relying on the fact that Amazon are actually taking care of that relationship for me and making sure that that is a good supplier as well at that point.
And obviously these guys are smart. So, you know, same in the hotel industry, you almost feel as if, okay, you know, at booking.com or hotels.com, you know, they've looked at the security, they've looked at whether these hotels are legitimate, and, you know, they take that kind of hassle away, and you're kind of buying into that confidence as such, right? And you're buying into that credibility. But in the long run, and hotels, you know, sort of, you know, sorry to kind of labor on that, but they kind of almost realized too late. You know, these aggregate sites and the OTAs got so powerful that then to try and claw that back has become really tough. And I think similarly, we've seen this as the restaurant industry, right? But it's happened. But it's happened so much quicker. It's happened so much quicker. If we look at OTAs, maybe that took, you know, 7 to 10 years for people to really realize how much of a problem this was. Restaurants, it's taken a year or two, right? You know, where restaurants have realized actually, you know, these aren't our customers. These are actually the customers of, you know, Deliveroo's or Uber Eats or whoever those companies are. And this is a massive challenge, because how do you build loyalty? How do you build a relationship? How do you really kind of manage that customer journey? It's really, really difficult to do so. You know, and almost, you know, again, and they're giving up a big slice of revenue for that privilege.
Exactly.
You know,
but that's the that's the cost benefit, isn't it? You know, and I think that's it. I think the cost is actually reaching a point where it is too great. And I think, and look, I think, you know, retailers have to be mindful of that when they are kind of stepping into this new journey. I mean, there's been a few malls that have offered up virtual stores for their tenants, for example, and obviously a lot of tenants have probably, you know, jumped on that, the opportunity to still have a conversation and interact with individuals, but they should be considering, or at least looking at, building out their own presence as well. I mean, look, I think the thing is, Amit, you know, you touched upon this, but I mean, say somebody wants to launch their own site, you know, what kind of data, how does a relationship change in your eyes? So if I'm interacting with you as a brand, you know, what can that brand do with their own environment that they couldn't do on an Amazon or another marketplace?
Yeah, I think the key to that is data. So the data accessibility that they have of somebody browsing on their own e-commerce store, and, you know, understanding the purchase history of individuals, I think is super important. You know, we have a lot of conversations with e-commerce retailers who have, you know, brick and mortar stores as well. And you know, one of the things that we do say to them is, guys, this isn't just a case of, you know, having a brick and mortar store and then suddenly opening an online store and, you know, everything's rosy. You know, with a digital store, yes, you don't have to worry about, you know, a lot of kind of physical aspects and things like that you have with your physical
cashiers
store.
and people on the shop floor and stuff.
Right, but data becomes your biggest sort of commodity, right? And your biggest asset. And if you don't manage that correctly, then you have an issue. And we're not talking about just a database where you know, you can send, you know, emails out and things like that. But we're talking about, you know, marketing automation, you know, intelligent tools, you know, where you've got predictive analysis, where you can kind of understand, you know, trends, you know, how best to market your product, personalization. I mean, you lose all of these opportunities. And look, and Amazon is just absolutely beautiful at it, right? You know, because they have all this data. They know exactly what we're interested in. You know, they show us products in a very kind of timely manner because they know our buying behaviors. And I think with retailers, when they kind of give this up, what they're losing is, well, I'd say they're losing a lot from a data perspective, but they're losing ground. You know, so the longer they rely on aggregators and marketplaces, you know, that the harder I think it becomes to sort of claw that back. I think in Amazon's world, actually, and again, this wasn't designed to be very Amazon focused, but I mean, these guys are very smart at understanding consumer demand, and they've made acquisitions on the back of understanding that demand. Right. So if you look at the purchase of Ring, you know, right, that was based on the fact that they kind of saw data, realized the power and potential of these products, and decided to buy the company. I mean, this is, you know, this is also, I think, really kind of interesting.
Yeah,
right?
look at Fire Sticks, look at Fire Tablets, look at Kindles. I mean, Audible, they bought Audible, but they looked at, you know, what was being sold and said, well, okay, hold on a minute, why don't we actually produce this ourselves and then interlace products? I mean, the interesting thing now as well, obviously from an e-commerce perspective, is if you've got, you know, another huge player that's just starting to enter the market in the shape of Facebook. So Facebook, obviously last week, you know, announced the launch of Facebook Shops. You know, they were trialing it a bit in the States with Instagram shops as well, where you don't leave that space. So you can have your own, you know, virtual or your own e-commerce store in Facebook or on Instagram. And I think that's an interesting dynamic again as well, because, you know, they have that data. They know what they're pushing, they know what they're pulling. So it'll be interesting, again, will this, with the Facebook shop, fall more in the marketplace camp or your individual camp? Because you could say, well, no, I've got my store, you know, and I'm on you know, Facebook. But actually, ultimately, you know, what kind of data are you going to be able to gain from them? I mean, you know, we should mention Shopify. Shopify, obviously, they launched their own marketplace about a month ago as well. Now you kind of seen their share price skyrocket. The Shopify is a platform, guys. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of a, you know, an e-commerce platform that's very popular, and obviously gaining some traction here locally as well. So I think, again, you know, this is going to be another dynamic for people to look at. So, you know, potentially, is it okay? And I think we've been asked the question, you know, should I be on all three, right? you know, should I have a marketplace? Should I have this? Should I have that? Just to kind of gain full control. I mean, you know, what do you think? Do you think this is kind of spread the love, or is this kind of focusing on one area? What do you think?
I think it's very difficult, if I'm honest with you. And I think it comes down to my product. You know, so if I want to control that brand experience, you know, if that's where my equity lies in terms of the business, then I think I focus fully on an e-commerce store. If I've got certain products which I just need to shift in volume, then perhaps I look at marketplaces. There's no right or wrong answer to this, if I'm honest with you. I think, you know, a lot of it will come down to people's budgets, their appetites to really kind of dive into e-commerce. But I do feel as if people have got really kind of any real long-term ambitions, you know, having your own store, having your own access to data, you know, that's going to be a long-term sort of determinant of success. And I think without that, you face challenges.
You said, obviously, I mean, you know, the customer experience and the customer journey is key here, and you're able to control that. I mean, there was quite famously, you know, I think Freedom Pizza that decided to remove themselves locally here in this market from some of these aggregators because essentially they were losing a connection with the customer. And at that point as well, the only time that the brand ever gets pulled back in is if it's a negative experience, right? So especially with the food, you know, or hotel or whatever, it's well, you know, I had a bad experience. I booked this and I got this. So this hotel room doesn't match, you know, what I saw on hotel.com, and that's not, at that point, that's not hotel.com's issue, right? Nobody thinks, well, I won't book again on hotel.com. They think, well, I won't look at the Meridian again, for example. So I think that customer experience as well, and you being able to personalize that experience or personalize that journey is crucial to conversion as well, right? And repeat purchase.
Yeah, and I think, look, also, I mean, you've also now got a whole load of just kitchens, right? Kitchens that are just producing food. They don't really care about a brand. It's more about the volume and offering availability. Kitchens, this is, you know, so again, I think that's similar to having those kind of, I don't know, phone cases online. You're not maybe too bothered about who buys them.
You're not worried about it,
but you just want to shift it, right, at a margin. So I think, you know, there's for different businesses and, you know, I guess aggregation models, there's different opportunities as well. But Andrew, I want to shift focus on B2B. But before we do that, there's a good question in from Raj. And it's again very B2C focused. So I want to kind of answer this. But Raj basically asks if you know, in this kind of very digital and complex world that we're in, what's the role of physical stores now, and what about the human capital involved? I mean, what are your thoughts here? What changes?
I think it does change. I think it looks very different. I think if you look at some of the massive disruptors out there in the marketplace, like a Casper, so if you're those who are unfamiliar, Casper, you know, took the US by storm and kind of Europe as well, where they changed the model of buying mattresses. So traditionally, obviously, people would go to a mattress store, they'd lay down, you know, test out the mattress. What they did is they flipped it. So you don't need to do that. Buy online, we'll ship it to you, and you can sleep on it for 100 nights. If you don't like it, just send it back, right? You know, free return. What they started to notice is that people, as they started to increase their product portfolio, people still actually wanted to kind of experience the product, you know? So what they started to do is they started to have these pop-up experiential stores. So you were able to go and touch, feel, look at some of these products. So I think that there's still maybe a case for kind of retail space, but I think the actual space itself is going to be very different. I think it's more experiential, you know, and allowing me to kind of hands-on see what this does for me, or as a gift or whatever, as opposed to, you know, huge retail spaces or huge malls. I mean, we've seen a shift anyway. As much as there's big malls here, a lot of them are dedicated to F&B and socializing, just because the weather here. So I think you'll start to see a bit of a shift. I think the challenge with the impact on individuals, obviously within that space, is it's almost going to be having to look at almost like you know, enhancing their skill set to kind of move with the times. So that may be more personalized shopper approach, or it may be looking to the digital space to, you know, to work in that field. You know, I think that the times of the retail, I mean, they're going to be tough for sure. I think that people still would probably like to go to a physical space to experience something, but I don't think that these huge stores are necessary anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I think.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, it's difficult. Again, keep saying it's difficult. I think because it is. But if we look at
tough, yeah.
if we look at two angles of this, so in the States, I'm trying to think when, but 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a conference where there was a new mall that was about to be launched, and this was and they called it almost like a digital e-commerce mall. And what they had is this was for companies who realized that people, before they bought their products, wanted to kind of touch and feel a product, right?
Yeah.
And so what they would have is, rather than having a big retail store like what you mentioned, they'd have a very small retail store, and they'd have maybe one product item of each category.
Yeah.
That allows for, you know, and that could be, you know, a company that sells jeans, for example, right? Where somebody can come in, they can touch a material, they can feel it, perhaps there's one of their size in there, but they can't buy from there. And then what the idea of our mall was, is then you've got, you know, different sort of kiosks where you can just go, place your order, and then leave. Now, I don't know how successful that's been, but at the time that did feel like it was maybe an interesting concept, right? You know, again,
look at Tesla. We spoke about Tesla, I think, a couple of weeks ago. You go to Tesla now, it doesn't matter if you've got a suitcase full of cash, you can't buy it from the Tesla showroom.
Sure.
Right?
So very similar to that. Yeah, very similar to that experience. But you can touch and feel one in the showroom, right? You just can't walk home.
Exactly. You go for a drive, you can take it out, have some fun, but you can't actually walk away with it. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that experiential,
Yeah, so I think there's still kind of room for that. I think the second thing, if we bring it on the human capital side, is you know, and I think one of our poll questions, we got some decent answers where people said, look, it's easier to buy through an e-commerce portal because we don't have to speak to a salesperson. You know, so you know, there's so much data out there, you know, especially millennials, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second as well. But you know, millennials, you know, all the data tells us that they don't trust salespeople. They don't want to speak to salespeople. They're empowered. They want to kind of learn, you know, learn themselves and educate themselves. And if that's the world that we live in, then the salespeople that are involved in retail need to really up their game, right? So they need to, you know, they're not 20 years ago, you know, somebody can walk into a retail showroom and guaranteed the salesperson knows more about their products than them.
100%.
Today, I don't think that's the case. And so, you know, if that salesperson isn't knowledgeable, doesn't know, as you know, needs to 100% know more about that product than the customer walking in. And I think if they can demonstrate that, then there's obviously value associated to those. I think if you get salespeople who haven't gone down that process, and there's a whole load of, you know, factors that influence that, such as training and things like that as well. But you know, I think that's where they might find themselves kind of redundant from a, you know, retail sales perspective.
I mean, you and I have been in a real environment where you and I were in Best Buy in New York. I don't know why it's pronounced it like that, but anyway, we were in New York, and we were looking to buy at the time, I think it was some Alexas, and you and I were both sitting there with review sites open, checking the reviews between the Alexa, Google Home, you know, Apple Pod. We were kind of doing all of that in the store, you know, and someone comes over and goes, hey, can I help you? No, we're good. Like, you know, you know, not that we're millennials, so just thought to throw it out there. But
yes, but there's a reason why I'm laughing, because you mentioned that. What did we walk away with, Andrew? It's almost embarrassing to say. We walked away with one of each. So instead of trying to figure out whether we wanted an Alexa or a Google Home, we actually bought both. So, and both of us bought both.
You know what? I forgot that. That wasn't probably not a good example. I should have said that. But yeah, if in doubt, just buy all of it, right?
Just buy everything.
Just buy everything. Yeah. That's it. But I mean,
pre-COVID world.
That kind of, yeah, exactly. Buy everything. But there's where the experience could be quite different. So I mean, it may be a sound room, it may be a little mock-up of an apartment or a mock-up of a house. You know, how is it you're using the Google Nest? How is it, for example, you mentioned Nest? How does this look in my home? What do they actually look like? How easy is it to fix? I think that's more that experiential. we will. There have been other questions, by the way, and there's some comments coming in, so we will get to them during the course of the show. And Dan just mentioned here, yeah, Nike are doing some interesting experiences. You can design your own shoes, personalize it as part of the purchase. Yeah, again, that goes back to that kind of millennial, and we talk about it, but the millennial focus of personalizing their experience, right? They want something very individual to them. So if it is going to a store just for an experience that you can't get at home, that may be a reason to drive people to a store. And that's across, I mean, not just retail. We've seen that, back home in banking. I mean, Virgin Money back home, they started to transform their stores they had a co-op workspace. They had, a Boohoo e-commerce store set up for delivery where you could see some products. So yes, you were going to the bank, but you're also you had a coffee in the bank, a whole host of other things, because obviously people stopped going to banks, right? So I think,
just back to that Nike point. I mean, so Fifth Avenue, New York, basketball court in the middle of a store, right?
So that's right.
So it's not just about, okay, I'm going to, I want to go in and try my shoes on. Actually, I want to go on and try my Jordans on, and I want to play basketball because that's what, that allows me to test the product. I mean, it's
exactly,
and you have a ton of people that are watching that court the whole time, and it's again experience. So yeah, great point, Dan. Cool. Look, so Andrew, B2B, because I think this is, everyone kind of knows about, B2C e-commerce. We're all kind of using it now. But in a B2B world, I mean, I kind of feel as if this is lagging slightly. And so I started researching this, in advance of a show, and also, previously when we've been kind of working and trying to figure this out. But there always seems to be barriers, when we kind of speak to our B2B clients. And, we kind of say to them, look, you need to kind of think about digital sales. I think there's, first and foremost, I feel as if there's a bit of an assumption that, when we're talking about B2B e-commerce, that people have to go in, I don't know, look for machinery on a web page, press, add to cart, buy now, and it's $1 million transaction they've got to put in their credit card. I think there's definitely a kind of misconception about that. And I think there's plenty of opportunities, right?
Yeah, and I think some also as well in line with that, perhaps someone's thought on B2B is an Alibaba, right? Where like, I'll go in and I'll buy, I don't know, like X 100,000 meters of material because I'm a textiler and I want obviously, I'm a fashion retail house and I want to use this electronic platform from there. So like, so I think, when you started kind of looking at this and we started looking at this, it was understanding, well, B2B e-commerce, what really is that, right? It's not one thing like it would be in B2C.
No, and I think again, some of the kind of objections that we hear, I think we can look at those, because I started kind of looking back at our CRM and some of our notes, and some of the objections that we've kind of previously had were, I think firstly, our B2B customers don't want to order online. Is that something you kind of believe in, or do you think that's changing, or what are your thoughts?
I think it is changing. I think you're starting to see a shift anyway, but obviously with what's happened, there's definitely, I'd say, more acceptance to looking at it, right? So, or engaging with it. I think previously, if there was, sometimes in this part of the world as well, we're guilty of kind of putting up barriers and saying, no, this is the way business is done, right? And it's been done like this for the last 40 years. Well, this has kind of smashed that really to the point where everyone is thinking differently, and everyone has had to carry on. So just like we're having virtual meetings, or we're having virtual games, or even family get-togethers, or like I said at the beginning, a virtual birthday party. The business space is changing. So I think that it's not so much anyway about us. It's more about people that are 10 years behind us, right? Well, you mainly, not me. Obviously, I'm a bit of a younger guy, but
you're obviously younger, but technically older. So look, I think you're right. I think there's definite challenges. we've got a poll on this. I think it'd be interesting to maybe just get some of the feedback on this, you know, from the audience, especially now from a B2B perspective. So this might not be for everyone, but if you are involved in B2B decision making or B2B purchases, you know, the question is, have you ever made a B2B purchasing decision solely using digital channels? So have you kind of done your research online, and then based on that, you know, made a decision on the back of it, maybe even prior to speaking to a salesperson or a company? And we'll just wait for. Great.
So as we said, this isn't you know, this isn't so much as far as, you know, going and filling out a physical cart. It may be, and I think we can mention some. Believe it or not, there's here in the region, there's an e-commerce platform for aluminium sheets. You can actually go in and buy, you know, tons of aluminium sheets in a shopping experience. But this is kind of more of that digital touch points to kind of make a decision.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll keep that running for another 10 seconds or so, so if you can just get your answers in. But I mean, yeah, I think this is the point. And I think we had a question earlier from Connect about, you know, definition of e-commerce and e-commerce strategy. You know, I think we've got to kind of differentiate what that looks like for different audiences, right? So from a kind of B2B and B2C perspective, B2C might be that entire online shopping journey. For B2B, it might stop at, you know, perhaps 90% of the way through that buying journey, right? You know, where you do need to then physically speak to somebody without, you know, before placing an order. But I still feel as if that sort of contributes to that e-commerce and digital sales role here. Let me just share these results because I think this is quite interesting again. So again, if we kind of summarize this, majority of people, you know, haven't made a B2B purchasing decision, but they want to. And I think this is really kind of key. So, you know, the reason why we ask this question is because if you are a B2B company and you have sort of considered e-commerce as a strategy for your business, you know, maybe it's time to kind of look at it a little bit closer. And again, I think let's look at the objections, because these might be similar to the kinds of objections that you had, or maybe you've kind of, you know, that have been a part of your thought process. You know, so like I said, firstly, you know, people, you know, B2B customers may not be willing to, but I think we can tackle that and say, well, actually, there's a couple of things here. Firstly, let's go back to millennials. So again, you know, we're talking about people now who, you know, typically, you know, want to self-educate. You know, they don't want to speak to salespeople. And I think for these guys, you know, especially as, you know, millennials now become senior decision makers, I think it's important for them to really kind of go as far as they can in that purchasing process without having to speak to somebody, right? So whether that includes kind of, you know, making sure that you've got enough content on your website where they can do their own research. I think things like that, I think, become sort of more and more important. You know, what are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously when we're kind of not shifting the conversation, but, you know, in making the conversation more inclusive. So when we look at B2B e-commerce, we do look at that digital sales process. So as far as individuals, as we've mentioned, you know, the kind of millennials that are now have certain frustrations, and I think we'll share some slides in a minute around that. You know, now is the opportunity as a business to look at some of those pain points and realize that people are changing the way that they interact with your organization. The fact is that, you know, previously there may have been more of an opportunity to talk to somebody, find out from a peer or something about a particular organization or a business, speak to someone, you know, directly. But now, obviously, most people's first port of call is going to a website. So seeing a website, doing their own research, perhaps watching a video, downloading a white paper, looking at a testimonial. This whole environment has changed and has forced people to change. Now, a lot, as I said, you know, a few minutes ago, what we're seeing is a shift in organizations that had no digital presence. So they're kind of making the first steps into that space. And I think what's interesting is, you know, they're almost actually at the same point as other businesses now, because other businesses are not thinking about this necessarily from a you know, an e-commerce perspective or a digital sales experience perspective. So, and they're coming on board and they're having similar conversations. So they actually almost have an opportunity to leapfrog, right? Existing businesses that up to this point you may thought have had a pretty solid environment, but they're kind of sitting back and saying, well, no, people don't want to do it. They only want to go so far. So I think that, businesses have got to be conscious of that as well.
Yeah, I think things change, right? And again, maybe it's something like COVID which fast tracks some of that change, and definitely kind of impacts mentality. We've got some data here, and I'm just going to share my screen very quickly because I think this is quite important just to understand. I think there's a couple of challenges. There's a couple of challenges here, Andrew. So, when a lot of B2B businesses, I think, still look at their websites as brochures, right? Like a digital brochure of a business. And I think some of that mentality has got to potentially change. But again, this data comes from the MX Group, and it was really kind of focused on millennial B2B decision makers. Okay, so just some context there in terms of where this data comes from. But perhaps right now we might all get away with not having a digital sales strategy or a digital B2B commerce strategy. But moving forward, I think we're going to all need to look at it, and some of this data really kind of cements that. So, what they ask people is, what kind of influences, B2B sales or vendor choice or things like that. And it's now not just about your website as a brochure, right? I mean, it's sort of far beyond that. I mean, to the point, I guess we can almost look at it and say, well, user reviews, potentially some of these are going to live outside of the website. I think webinars are interesting because, I think certainly the ability to sort of educate your audiences, I think it has a really kind of important role in this process. And sometimes if you're kind of using digital, in that kind of as a replacement but for potential, face-to-face one-on-one time, I think this can be a really good medium. Okay. Case studies obviously are important now and potentially always have been, but interactive content. And again, I think out of all of these, interactive content and maybe case studies are the only ones that really live on a website. But the rest of these things are potentially outside of that. So big sort of influences there. Any kind of thoughts on that before I move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main driving factors of us kind of doing this show, right, the Digital Growth Show, was that it presented an opportunity to essentially get out there and talk amongst ourselves and really kind of share the knowledge, right, that we have as far as we're seeing multiple businesses across hundreds and thousands of verticals on a daily basis. We're interacting, and the whole team are interacting with that, and we're pulling that collective knowledge and putting it out there. And it would be very difficult to almost kind of pull this content in another medium, right? So we see the stats. Obviously we thank you guys for watching us live, as it were, but it's a whole host of people that watch this after the event. So we've still got people watching episode 1 and 2 that was 5 weeks ago now. So I think the thing is that for us to produce content outside of this webinar environment would be a challenge, right? But what it's done is it's allowed us to produce this and produce content that hopefully people can take away, use in their own life and their own business environment.
Yeah, I mean, content lives on. I think this is a point, right? So it's more than just immediate. Just the next one. I'll whiz through these, but essentially, so if again millennials, when they are kind of looking at that research process, and when they're kind of really kind of looking for a potential vendor, what's important to them. And again, review sites pops up, web searches. So it is important to be visible, I guess, on search engines. That's nothing new, right? But offering things like demos and trials, again, taking a risk component out of B2B purchases is important. Social media increasingly so. And I think what really surprised me here was that peers and colleagues, essentially that kind of word of mouth, that trusted word of mouth, it's not as important as reviews from strangers, perhaps, right? And I think that's really interesting.
I guess it's the collective at that point where you may not be able to ask your peers or colleagues around a particular business decision because you just may not have the sheer data versus going to, I think we use, a whole bunch of different review sites when we're talking about, for example, HubSpot to a potential client. At that point, we say, well, how does it beat X, Y? How does it beat Salesforce? How does it stack up against Dynamics on the CRM level? And we actually send people to independently review sites. Hey, listen, don't take our word for it. go and see this and kind of see the independent reviews on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last one here is again quite important, because again, what's important to your purchasers, and again, these might not be decision makers right now. These are, again, millennials, but maybe 5 years from now, this becomes really important. So, I think there is a bit of time for B2B businesses to sort of transition into kind of digital sales. But what I think, again, there's some really kind of interesting data here. We don't want to read all of it out.
I think if you just want to pull some of these out now, I mean, look at where we are now and how important it's going to be to count essentially every penny, right? For every business owner and business individual. And I think here where it says, provided content that made it easier to show ROI or build a case study for a purchase, 53%, right? And very important, and 44%. I think these are some of the things that need to be implemented by organizations now in that digital experience. And also things like, the way that a vendor responds. This again is something where technology can be leveraged, or the digital sales aspect, which can be implemented to make sure that somebody is getting what they want when they want it. So even if it is, for example, when we're firing out things at 2 o'clock in the morning, if somebody comes back on our site at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're awake clearly at that time, but everyone else is asleep. But there's a pop-up, there's a bot, there's a chat that enables you to have a conversation and still get the information that you want at that time. Again, in a very personalized manner. We live in this Netflix world. We live in this ability to cancel and, immediately kind of reactivate things on a whim almost. So we've got to allow some of that in the B2B space. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we'll look at a couple of more kind of objections that we get, Andrew, because it's a shame actually, but these surveys didn't really touch on it. But one of the things that we get all the time is price transparency, and I get that from a B2B perspective. There's maybe a limited number of potential vendors, competitors. Then if you're suddenly very transparent about your pricing models, or the cost of your services, whether it's kind of a product or service that you sell. Price transparency. I mean, what are your thoughts there? I mean, I've got an opinion on this, but it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. Do companies need to be transparent?
I think my thought process probably follows yours. As far as I think, we've spoken. I think we can kind of throw it out there. The kind of great Marcus Sheridan. As far as I saw him going back nearly, I think it may have been 6-7 years ago when I first saw him speak about, do you put your pricing on your website? And nobody put their hand up, right? And no one spoke about pricing. And everyone's answer was exactly the same. Well, it's personalized. I've got, I haven't got a set price. I'm not productized. I'm not, and I think that hasn't changed. I think there's still there's a discomfort talking about price, or at least having a conversation around price, because people a lot of the time people are driven by price. So there's a concern that you raising it at the very beginning either qualifies or disqualifies people straight away and negates the conversation. Which
is great. I mean, in some respects, right? Because again, if you can qualify a client by price, I'd say more importantly, if you can disqualify
exactly
a prospect because they can't afford your business, your products or services.
I
mean, you're saving not just you, but perhaps multiple members of your team a lot of time and effort on a deal that's never going to get anywhere. And I think typically, in the B2B world, price is almost that last thing you talk about. And if it's suddenly became the first thing that you spoke about, I mean, I can think of the amount of hours that I may have saved over the kind of course of my career just by having some sort of disqualification metric there. So I think the price is important, and yes, it does depend on each customer possibly. Customizations obviously impact price, but again, I think being brave enough to talk about it, potentially again in the digital world when your buyers are going to rely on that information online. I think that can open so many doors for a company as well. So, and actually we have implemented these kind of strategies for a number of businesses. So if you've got any questions related to that specifically, reach out to us on LinkedIn or whatever, however you can find us after show. But, I think there's definite kind of methodologies, and we've proven that to be successful. And I think the last kind of big objection I see is that, if people are ordering B2B services or products online, it's cold. It's not relationship based, where maybe not going to get longevity with this client. This is someone who's maybe only going to use us for a little while. I can understand that, but I'm seeing that as less important, especially over the last 3 months, for a number of reasons. But what's your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that you still have the ability to build a personal connection or build some warmth. But what it does, it just allows you in a digital sales environment to bring it in at the right time. So I think the thing is that, if we start to believe that the consumer or the customer or client wants to, build their own experience with you and their own journey, and you allow them to do that, there is opportunities to create some touch points and some warmth through that. So it may be something as simple as a walkthrough of a proposal through video, for example. I think we've done this where, with the proposal could be, left open questions. So it may be, well, hold on a minute, why is this here and this here? We spoke about this on the phone, but what you've actually done is you've done something different. So I think that, something like a personalized walkthrough of a deck or a presentation or a quotation is a way to create some personal dynamic, and also create some warmth along the way, without kind of forcing it, right? So I mean, that's where I'd say that we're able to do that through those digital touch points, and also just this video capability, the ability to communicate with individuals, and a comfort level. We've seen a comfort level, compared to 2 months ago to now. I'd say there's a huge level of comfort now, and also I think it's important, and just quickly, that this isn't, I was speaking to people this week, just last week, that have been working from home for 5 years. So this isn't new for them. Having online meetings is not new for them. Meeting people for the first time, up to the point where they're closing business, they're never going to meet them, right? Ever. But they're still doing business. Yeah.
No, I agree. Leanne's asked a question, I think, which is a really kind of important question, and her question is focused on quality, and specifically the quality of a final product. So in B2B, where there could be production of hundreds or thousands of a certain product, is it safer to be able to physically touch or see a sample of a product, before you kind of go into purchasing? Leanne, I'll kind of sort of help with this, and we'll talk B2B and B2C with this. But from a B2B perspective, again, I think you only need to potentially take the journey so far, but there are so many efficiencies in speaking to a customer that's 80 or 90% certain that they're going to work with you or buy your product, than if you're dealing with somebody who's maybe, again, you're one of maybe 10, right? So they're only maybe 20 or 30%, through that journey before they speak to you. So if you can use, again, reviews and testimonials that kind of emphasize quality, that's going to take people much further down that kind of B2B sales funnel. And I think that's important. The second way to counter that, and that's why I want to bring B2C into this, is I think it comes back to reducing risk, right? Because for me, quality is a risk question. So if you had a money back guarantee, if you're not satisfied with a product, return it within 7 days for a full, all of those things, I think we start to see something which then does start to work a lot more for B2B businesses. If we kind of look at the B2C side of that, a really good example, I mean, Andrew mentioned the mattress companies, which now let you sleep on their product, right? But in the car industry, this is changing massively. So in the US, there's a company called Carvana. There's something very similar in the UK. And what these businesses allow you to do is purchase cars, which aren't small purchases, but purchase secondhand cars online. They get delivered to your door, and you know what? You can drive around these cars for a week, and if you don't like it, send it back. You get your money back, right? And I think people were never kind of comfortable with buying. I mean, a car is something that you kind of touch and feel, but what they've also got in there is they've made sure that the maintenance and warranty and all of those kinds of things, all the challenges that people face when buying a secondhand car, you know, they've provided comfort levels. Like, look, drive it around for as much as you want. It's fully covered and warranted for up to 3 months. But hey, look, if you don't like it after a week anyway, just send it back. And these companies are absolutely flying. You know, they're quickly turning into billion-dollar enterprises because, you know what, they're just making it easier for people to buy sort of big ticket products.
Exactly.
But you got to be brave, and you've got to be able to kind of, you know, have the right processes and believe in your product and your service, I think. And I think these things I think are relevant again for both B2C and B2B businesses.
I think you hit the nail on the head there with trust. Yeah. So that trust element is key. So what you're doing, you know, when you're starting to build that trust in either in a B2B or B2C space, you know, you're starting to edge away at people's trust. So at the one point, you know, they may have heard of you or they've landed on your site through a recommendation, but there's still very little trust at that point. So as you said, there is risk associated to engaging with business in that business. But as you start to add more value and kind of little trust, you know, almost like a trust ladder. So the kind of more steps you take, the more trusting you are of that business. So that may be putting in testimonials. It may be, you know, allowing them to speak to existing customers, you know, hey, listen, don't trust me, talk to one of my customers, you know, and start to build that. And it may be, obviously at one point there may have to be a physical component, but as you said, if you're so far down the journey at that point that all you need to do you know, is okay. Look, I want to see some of this timber. You know, I want to see this timber, see the quality. It's not water damaged or it's being stored correctly. You know, let me see it. They're so far down the journey at that point, and there's so much stickiness created with you that ultimately that just should be the final piece. You know, I mean, aside from things like, you know, escrow accounts and obviously just the, you know, don't want to get too deep into that, but as far as just building that digital sales journey, this is important. I think this is, again, when you and I were talking about this is where B2B can start to leverage that e-commerce play. So it's not necessarily putting, you know, for us, right? So it's not necessarily putting out like a lead gen package or a social media package or something like that. It's not about that, but it's about educating potential, you know, customers and clients to the point where they do want to, you know, kind of reach out a bit more and touch and feel, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Andrew, I think we're going to have to wrap up there. It's we're over time again. So
it's not working out well. I think we originally said that we were going to cap this at 35 minutes. But we seem to kind of push over that hour. But honestly, we're only actually doing that as well, to be fair, because people are continuing to watch. So if we saw you know, amazing. Yeah, that's great. Just got a great comment there from someone that we know. So, but I think the nice thing is obviously that people are hanging around for this, and we're seeing that again. We also track everything, so we see that people are watching us on post event as well.
Yeah, look,
I feel like we scratched the surface though. Genuinely, Amit.
You're right. I mean, honestly, this is such a deep topic. We probably could have done a B2B show separately.
Yeah.
But I think, look, this is cool. I think, guys, we always, you know, we welcome your feedback. Any comments, you know, if you think parts of the show don't work, or if you've got any topics that you want us to look at. If you don't like the show, then just email Andrew. But if there's kind of interesting topics you want to look in the future, just don't watch. If there's interesting topics that you want us to look at in the future, then direct those to me as well. But guys, you know, like I said, we want this to be interactive. So thanks to Thomas, Dan, Leanne, and all the others that sort of contributed, Raj as well. You know, thank you guys, because honestly, it really kind of helps us, you know, mid-show to really kind of direct the conversation. Sorry we couldn't get around to kind of answering all those questions. There's a lot today. But guys, look, thank you again. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure what topic we're going to focus on. But again, guys, if you've got any comments or suggestions on that, let us know. And we're happy to take it on. Yeah? Awesome.
Definitely.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Any fun?
I think that's it. Yeah, no, I'll let you sign off because I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with all of you. Andrew talks too much. So I think on that note, we'll end it there. Thanks, guys, and see you next week.
See you later. Bye.